Where do you check for DNA left by burglars?
You actually check everywhere. Because when burglars go into a property or they go into someone's shed or garage, generally the first place they touch is the entry point, isn't it? So when a burglary takes place, if somebody was to go through a window, then you first sort of look at the window to see if there's anything that is out of place. And generally, if you would find a fingerprint, if somebody's doing a burglary, they may be excited a little bit, and by being excited, they sweat. And when they sweat, they leave their paw behind. In other words, they leave their scent or they leave a bit of themselves behind. So when burglaries happen, generally what you're looking for is where they enter and items they may have touched or moved. So that's where we generally look, because whenever you move something or you enter a room, you can leave your DNA behind.
How can you identify the criminal from a piece of hair?
Hair is just one of the ways that we're able to identify people through DNA. As I say, there's sweat, there's flakes of skin, somebody's blood if they cut themselves, and yes, right, your hair. If I was to now just go to you, because I see you've got lovely long hair, but if I was to cut just the bottom of your hair, I wouldn't get any DNA from that. It's got to actually be what they call the follicle, which is the point or the root of the hair. And what generally happens is that your DNA comes from that part of it, because it comes out of your skull, and that's where you've got your own unique DNA. So that's how we find out your DNA. And what we generally do, say we found a hair follicle at a burglary scene, and the way they collect those is, say somebody's jewellery case was left on their dressing table, and on the dressing table the crime scene investigator sees a piece of hair. He may, with a piece of tape, lift that hair up, sends it off to the lab, and they get a DNA profile because it gets checked by a scientist. Then when they get a profile, maybe you've been naughty some time before and they've got your DNA result on there. So they come back and they say to us, that hair belongs to Mrs. Smith, say. Okay. So they introduce Mrs. Smith. We go knock on someone's door. Mrs. Smith gets brought into the police station, and we then take 10 follicles of your hair. And then it goes back to the lab, and we ask the laboratory scientist to check those hair follicles against those that may have been on the system before for when you came into police custody for some other matter for which you may have been arrested. So that's how we get it.
The bottom of your hair, could that tell anything to do with your DNA or anything like that?
I think it can. It can't be specific as to who the person is, so you can't build a DNA profile, they call it, so you can't build a profile from it. But you can, and I know it's happened before, they can tell whether you're a smoker, they can tell whether you have certain allergies, and they can also tell you the makeup of your hair. The scientists can tell you, whether you've got dry hair or whether you're male or female as well from that part of the hair. But there's not enough in it to actually identify who that person is specifically. But there are things in it that they can tell you about, which probably for police officers would help us slightly if we had no idea. So one, it might tell you if it was male or female. And secondly, it might be also telling us that if you've had your hair coloured, it might be able to tell us exactly the hair colourant you used and the make of the colourant. And then, of course, police would then go off and see which companies might sell that sort of product and things like that. So you're able to. And also it keeps things like chemicals. So say you was working in a kitchen, they might say, well, this person must work near a fryer because they've got oil in their hair, and that oil is vegetable oil, generally used, say, in deep fat fryers at chip shops. So it's things like that, and of course as investigators that just helps us draw up a picture of possible person that we're looking at.
How much evidence can I leave from being in a room for 5 minutes?
A lot. We've just sat down in this room, okay, and you've got long hair, you put your hand through your hair, and say you suffer from, dandruff, or you scratch your hair. Every time you scratch, parts of your body, your skin, fall off. And as I say, if we were to put a tape onto the floor now, and we were to just pick up that tape and it picks everything up off there, these scientists can pick those small bits of skin and they can analyse those skin, and from that skin they can get your DNA. So in 5 minutes you can leave a lot. If you think that you may sneeze whilst you're in a room and you sneeze onto the table, again, that's fluid from your body. That fluid contains your DNA. So again, just in 5 minutes we can pick up a lot. You scratch your eye, and your eyelids or your eyelashes are very similar to your hair follicles. So again, as long as we get them with the root on it, again, we could get your DNA from it. So in 5 minutes, you can leave a lot behind. Even now, somebody picking up a brick and throwing a brick through a window. Okay, it takes no more than a couple of seconds, doesn't it? But again, you can pick up your DNA from the sweat that you might leave on the brick or the stone.
What surprising places have you found DNA from criminals?
So what surprising places? Toilets is one of them. People will forget that, but if they're not, that's one of the most silliest sort of things sometimes, that DNA can be found. Blood is the normal one. People forget that when they cut themselves or they've got a graze on their arm that may be just leaking or something like that, then they leave it behind. But some real funny places, I think that's got to be the funniest, I think, is the toilet.
So they probably needed the toilet.
They do. And of course, when people use the toilet, they forget that, again, you're leaving parts of your body behind, aren't you? It's not a particularly good job to have to go and take samples out of there when you're looking for DNA. But as you say, some people, because there is an excitement to some people when they commit crime, they can't help it, the adrenaline's running in their body, they desperately need the toilet. And if they're in your house, they won't think twice about using it. But some men sprinkle when they tinkle, as they say, and unfortunately they leave their DNA behind. So again, there we are. So that's about the funniest, I suppose.
Okay. Have you ever thought that the DNA was from one person and it turned out to be from someone else?
Yes. We've very difficult, and a colleague of mine has just told me recently with regards to DNA that can be the same. Twins, for instance, identical twins have the same DNA. So it's very, very difficult. And in law, you've got to be on reasonable doubt with regards to charging somebody and finding somebody guilty of an offence. So if you've got if you have a sister, an identical twin, and we found the DNA, we wouldn't know whether it was you or the other person, would we? So you obviously have to look at other evidence that might be able to differentiate between whether it was you or your twin sister. Okay, and I've had a case where I've had two brothers, identical twins, who both worked for a prison. One of them committed the crime, but the other one was arrested and interviewed regarding it and didn't know anything about it. Didn't know what was going on, but of course all the questions we put to him with regards to, well, you work at the prison, so it's got to be you. And we went through it all like that, and he said, I wasn't there on that particular day. And of course on the day that we were looking at, when the DNA was found on that particular day, he was abroad on holiday, and of course we couldn't work it out. Until one day when we were doing what we call outside the prison, we saw him coming out with his brother. And then it suddenly dawned at us that he'd never mentioned it before, we never looked or inquired about it, but he had a twin brother.
Oh dear.
Yeah. But of course already we'd interviewed the only other person it could be was his brother. But then again, it's very difficult. We had to question him the same and ask where he was at that particular time. And unfortunately for him, there was some lovely CCTV showing him coming out, so it just helped. We had the CCTV of coming out, but at the same time we also now had his DNA. But yeah, that can be difficult. But now I think they're working on the lines that they're finding different things now that can identify now between the difference between twins' DNA. Every year new development comes out that helps us with regards to finding something unique about somebody.
How do you get to do your job? You
need qualifications, which is something I think you will need when you leave school, isn't it?
Yeah.
Okay, because it gives your employer an understanding of what sort of level you're able to work at. And generally you need good qualifications. The main ones are English and maths, aren't they? Generally a science, something like that. And you've got to be good at interviews, because there's a lot of people these days going for the same sort of job as you're looking for. And you've got to be career-minded. I think if you go into the police, it's something that you consider as a career. So it's something that you might want to consider for the rest of your life. And when you go into it, there's so many different avenues that you can go down. You can go into a car crime, you can go into working in uniform where you're frontline policing, where you deal with riots, you deal with 999 calls where you're the first people to attend an incident that needs you to deal with it, that sort of thing. You can go onto the crime side where you investigate crime, and you can specialise in things like dog handling, firearms, science is another one, obviously forensic science you can work on. So there's all different avenues that you can go down. But generally it starts off with just having a good sort of good qualifications from school. And once you've got those, then obviously the door opens to you, because one of the first things you have to get through is what they call a paper sift. And what that means is somebody first of all reads what you've got to say about yourself and what you've got. And if you can pass that, then you can sell yourself by being able to talk to them and have a conversation.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you for coming in.
Not a problem. I've enjoyed it. Thank you.